Waiter waitresses of Reddit, what's the most awkward first date you've seen go down while working? At the end of the dinner, two couples on a double date dine and dash. I chased them down, and the girls had no clue. Their dates had told them they already paid. The girls ended paying. The guys had no cash. I wonder how their second date went. As a former server, I have to say it's not the first dates that stick out. It is the we're breaking up and let's have dinner and talk about it tables that really stay with you. My wife broke up with me while we were dating at an Indian restaurant. We made up and have been married about 8 years now, but it took a dang long time before I could eat Indian food again. More sad than awkward. A guy in a wheelchair comes in at about 1:15. Says he has a date at 3, but the only ride he had there was early, so I sat him at a table for 2. He munches on bread for a while and decides to go outside a bit. He ends up coming back in about 20 minutes later and starts telling me and the host I'm working with cheesy jokes. He also mentions that he used to be a policeman before he became wheelchair bound. He also told us his date is from Panama. The other host and I had a bad feeling about this situation at that point. 3 o'clock rolls around and I see the guy anxiously glancing between his phone and the door. About 45 minutes pass of this before he finally leaves. This was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Dang, this one hurts. I wasn't a server, but I was a line cook at a restaurant. It was a typical Friday night, and pretty busy in the kitchen. A server comes in and asked if I spoke Chinese. I said yes, and he told me to go talk to some guests at a table. I told him they will have to wait because we are in the middle of a dinner rush. About an hour later, things slows down a little, so I follow up with the server. He proceeded to point out the table of guests that needed help, so I walked out of the kitchen with the expectation of maybe translating the menu for them or something. When I got up to the table, I noticed it was a white guy and an Asian girl, so I asked the gentleman how I could help him. He then asked me to translate for him. It was at that point I realized they were on a first day. The guy asked me to translate a few things for him, like how did you enjoy the dinner, did you enjoy the date so far and other small talk, and I would have to translate that to the girl, and then translate her respond back to English for him. This went on for about 5-10 minutes. Eventually, he asked me to ask the girl if she wanted to sleep with him. The girl asked him if he had a GF. I had to stand there and translate this conversation. Eventually, the girl shot the guy down, and it got pretty awkward at that point, so I found an excuse to get back in the kitchen. TLDR, had to translate for a guy and asked the girl if she wanted to have sex with him. A young couple was at my table. They were probably 16. She was way overdressed for Red Lobster and a movie, but it was cute. He went to pay and his card was declined. I felt so horrible walking back to the table. He said there should be plenty in his bank account and I asked if he had put gas in his car before the date. He said he filled up his truck. Some gas stations here hold the amount twice on a debit card after a certain hour and it drops off the next day. The poor kid was so embarrassed he had no idea what to do. My boss paid for his meal, my tip, and gave him money for the movie they were planning to go to. Kid came back in 2 days later with all the money to pay my boss back. Man, this story. I've never associated Red Lobster with classy, but your boss changed that. I can't believe he even gave some cash for the movie, too. Bartender here. Had a guy this past summer come in for Match.com meetups 4 different times with 4 different ladies. For one of his dates he told everyone else at the bar that he was from Match.com. His date was late, so everyone at the bar was concerned for him. He told everyone to clap when she arrived. When she finally came, everyone at the bar clapped and cheered. She was horribly embarrassed. No wonder why this guy doesn't hold on to girls for long. I'm a hostess and when we seat people we have to talk about the specials happening that day. Well, enough, 2 people come in and they don't appear to be a couple. Both were very stern looking. I start giving my spiel about the drink specials. She cuts me off and says she won't be drinking tonight. The guy looks at her and asks why. She tells him she's pregnant. And let's keep in mind that I am right there in between them with no option to walk away because I am still holding the menus. Well, he freaks out, quickly questioning her and getting very angry. She starts yelling at him. A lot of tension is floating around, and in the midst of all this anger about being pregnant I chime in and mention that we are also having a special on our baby back ribs. The moment after I realize what I just said, they are staring at me with their jaws dropped. I look them dead in the eye and walk away. I am not good in these types of situations. This happened to a friend of mine. Alex, not his real name, but it works for this scenario as unisex first names end up being important. He's on a blind date with a friend of a friend. Alex gets a table at a fairly fancy restaurant that his friend Steve works at as a manager. He arrives first and she gets there about 15 minutes late. No big deal. They chat over drinks. At this point he doesn't think it's going super great, but doesn't think it's too awkward. At some point after they order their food she excuses herself to the bathroom. A minute or so after she leaves the table he gets a text on his phone. It's from his date. It says something along the lines of "I hate blind dates. This guy is a total loser. At least I'll get a few free meals out of him." Alex realizes that the text wasn't meant for him, but for his date's female friend also called Alex. He gets up from the table, finds Steve in the back, tells him what happened, asks for his half of the order taken off of the ticket, and then leaves before she gets back to the table. Alex's date comes back from the bathroom apparently unaware that she texted the wrong person. Due to some mix-up, the entire order still arrives at the table. Reportedly, she didn't wait for or even question Alex's absence before she began eating. In fact, she finishes nearly all of her meal before asking her waiter where Alex had gone. The waiter checks with his manager, Steve, finds out about the situation and informs her that Alex left while she was in the bathroom. Then he hands her the check. The best part is that she didn't have enough money to cover the check. She had to call a friend to come down to the restaurant and pay for her meal. Steve wasn't too keen on letting her slide on the bill. TLDR. Woman accidentally texts her date about only going out with him for free food. He sticks her with the check. I've been waiting for so long to tell this story. So I'm a server at Red Robin and I once served a teenage couple probably around 17 or 18, easily seniors in high school. They had obviously been dating for a while since they already knew what they wanted and ordered for each other. The date night seemed to go pretty well. They ordered their drinks, ordered an appetizer, then ordered their food. Only their drinks had come out yet when finally, after holding hands for a long while, the guy looks into the girl's eyes and apparently broke up with her. I had been standing from a distance keeping an eye on my tables when suddenly I see this happening and watch the girl's face just turn from happiness to just absolute horror. Tears well up and she started banging her fists on the table, screaming out at him that he's in butthole and whatnot. Everyone in the restaurant can hear it and everything just stops. As she's becoming more and more volatile, he's trying to calm her down. I'm not sure what to do at this point. Even my manager had come out and looked at me as if we both didn't know how to handle this. Finally, the guy yells, "Fine, fine. If you don't want to be civil then I'll go." She begs him to stay, but he pries himself away and beelines for the door. She doesn't follow him. He passes me on the way to the door, stops, and walks back towards me. He hands me $50 and says, "You can already obviously see why I did what I did. I just apologize that you had to deal with this here and now. Take care of her, and make sure she's okay." He then leaves. She sat for the next 3 hours, not crying, but just staring blankly into the wall. She ate both of their meals and the tower of onion rings. On another note, a lady crap herself at my work once. TLDR. Broke up, broke down, broke waistline. She ate both of their meals and the tower of onion rings. A defeat followed by a massive victory. Guy comes in alone, asks for a table for two. I seat him in the corner in a booth where it's quiet and secluded. He says his date should be here any minute. I get him the beer he ordered and a bunch of chips and salsa. 20 minutes later, he's on his second beer and he promises me that she's going to be here soon. She just texted him and said she's on her way. I really don't care because it's really slow and I like this guy cause he's super low maintenance. I brought him out some Quizo to go with the chips he was eating alone. An hour goes by. There were 2 instances of a single woman coming in saying she was meeting someone, and both of these women were directed to this guy, but neither of them were his date. Now I'm kinda feeling bad for the poor fella. 3 hours after I sat him down, he'd had 9 beers and I brought him a few rounds of shots occasionally just because the entire staff knew what was up by now. Felt so bad for him. He was freaking drunk. He goes out the back door to start puking in the alley. As his date finally walks through the door, I sat her down at their table, got her drink, then went out back to give the guy a smoke and let him know his date was here. He was not happy. I walked him back inside, sat him down, and watched them formally introduce each other. I did not realize this was a blind date. I left awkwardly and immediately. They paid and left maybe 5 minutes after that, just enough for the lady to finish her drink. I guess she gave him a ride home, but I don't really know. I didn't think she was actually going to show, otherwise I'd have cut him off well before that. Oh well, hope he got laid that night. Well, I'm assuming bartending is close enough, since I did serve food as well. I did this for a number of years, but one story, man, this stands out. This younger lady comes in by herself, comes up to the bar, and says she'd like a table in the back, alone. It's a slow night, I was working alone, so I sat her, brought her a drink, etc. She's there for about an hour, has a couple of drinks, and keeps checking her phone. I finally asked her if she was expecting someone, and her response was a sad smile and a nod. Almost immediately after that, this guy, early 30s, comes in, asks for a table for two. This guy reeks of douche canoe. On his arm is this slightly trashy, very early 20s girl who's already drunk, loud, and freaking obnoxious. She keeps talking about how lucky she is to finally get this guy out with her, how it's been the first best date ever. I get them their food order, and they can barely keep their hands off of each other. I also noticed that the lady sitting by herself has gone white as a ghost, and is shaking a little bit. She takes out her cell phone, and takes a few pictures. About this point I know what's going on, and I just try to avoid it. Lady number 1 walks up, puts some papers down on the table, and says, "We're getting divorced." She then looks at the lady, who turns out to be her little sister, and tells her to never talk to her again. She then comes up, pays for her meal, and walks out, leaving the most utterly destroyed first date I have ever seen. It was phenomenal. Yay, something I can finally answer. I had a table once where this guy came in for a blind date. When the girl got there, it was obvious she was already a little tipsy. Well, a little ways into the meal and after having one drink, she threw up all over herself at the table. She went to the bathroom and the guy had to ask another server to go check on her. In the bathroom she also proceeded to vomit all over the toilet seat. I felt so bad for the guy, but he was so nice about it. He waited for her to get cleaned up and took her home. That must have been the most awkward car ride ever. We have a rich, middle-aged guy that comes in almost every Friday with a new date. A couple of servers I work with have a pool if the date will last shorter or longer than 30 minutes. Unders have one probably 70% of the time. I think the best story I heard from one of his dates was when he asked where the lady was from. She answered Miami and he told her to leave. Weird dude. I was a waitress in college. A couple came in and sat at my table. Just your average Minnesota man and a nice Latina lady. They started chatting and it immediately became clear that she speaks no English. None. It turns out I'm fluent in Spanish, so I went back to take their order, and I sat and translated for them for a bit. It was awkward but okay. I went back a few minutes later to drop off their appetizer and the man looks at me and says, "I can't do this. Tell her I'm leaving." I said no, absolutely not. He said, "Well, I'm leaving whether you tell her or not, so you probably should." As I started to panic, both of them burst out laughing. Turns out they're regulars that have been married for 20 years. They were trolling me after a friend told them I spoke Spanish. This one starts out awkward but takes a bit of a turn. I'm a host. I sat a gentleman, very well dressed, named Greg, who told me he was meeting a girl for their first date. About half an hour passes, and no one shows up. It's a Sunday night so it's pretty slow, so I come by and check on him. He hasn't heard from her or anything. Another half hour, then another. He finishes his entree, pays, and walks up to me and says, "Dang, she's not coming." Whatever. I try and convince him to stick it out at the bar for a little bit but he isn't having it. He leaves. 20 minutes later, a girl shows up. She says her phone is dead and her car broke down on the way to her date with a guy named Greg. I say he got fed up and left and she starts to cry because she really thinks she fricked up. I tell her it'll be okay. The guy signed up for a rewards program and we had his cell number. Officially I'm not supposed to do this, but I called him up and told him his date was here and he didn't believe me. So I put her on the phone and he was back 20 minutes later. They seemed to really hit it off. And as he left he said thanks man and slipped me a $5, the only direct tip I've ever gotten. They just came in together yesterday. It makes me really happy that they're still dating. Dang, that's awesome. Bending the rules to make someone's, or some people's, day is always awesome. I was working at a restaurant, and this guy I had met a few days before came in before my shift ended to wait for me. He was going to take me out as soon as I finished. He was a few hours early. I brought him a drink and told him it would be a while, and he said that was fine. The place got pretty busy and after a while I noticed there is a girl sitting down with him having drink. I went over to bring him another beer, and she was drinking also. I served them more drinks. He introduced her as an old friend from school, and she kind of just gave me a quick up and down, seemed annoyed, and started chatting away with him, giggling at everything he said. It was a bit weird to watch. My boss asked me if I could stay late because it had become so busy, but I said no, I'm actually going on a date and pointed him out. She laughed and said, "Really? With that guy that's been drinking with that other girl?" I sheepishly said yes. The girl had left just before I was done, but he was pretty drunk by then. I asked him if he still wanted to go, and he said of course. Anyway, he ended up being so drunk that I left and went home. I went out with him again and again. He got way too drunk and passed out. I turned him down the next time he asked. About a year later, I was working at a different bar. They walk in, newlyweds. I found this out when she told the bartender she wanted to beat me up or something because I was trying to take her man. She didn't and I told the bartender what happened, but I'd be interested to hear how she perceived what was happening. So yeah, that was pretty much the most awkward first date I have seen while working as a waitress, and it was mine. Well, on the bright side, you dodged a bullet on that one. I would have told a girl off in public at my job if some she-bee did that to me. So I work at a Great American Cookies as a cake decorator and we get will you be my date cakes all the time. Sometimes the customers give us flowers or a card to give to the person that comes to pick it up, i.e., boyfriend orders cake, gives us a flower, girlfriend picks up cake and we give her the flower. Kinda like singing messengers. One day an older male came up and ordered a cake for his wife's birthday and asked if we could give her an envelope, but she was the one to pick it up. Just curious, we asked him what was in it. He said to tell her to open it there with us and she'd tell us all about it, that it was a surprise. We agreed. He paid for the cake and later that day the wife comes up and gets the cake and envelope. She loves her cake even though it's pretty simple and opens the envelope as he had instructed. She starts bawling her eyes out. This guy had us serve her his divorce papers. We noticed he was standing only a few feet away. He was a scumbag Steve if I've ever seen one. Long story short, we do not take envelopes without the customer telling us exactly what is inside. Oh, and he got us to serve papers for free when anyone else would have charged $50. Didn't even tip us for having to deal with his crying soon-to-be ex-wife. TLDR. Scumbag Steve made a cake decorator serve his wife divorce papers when she came to pick up her birthday cake. This isn't awkward. This is freaking horrific. Not really a waiter, but I worked as a barista and witnessed numerous obvious first dates. One time this super nerdy guy brings in this pretty attractive girl. I'm rooting for him because I used to be quite nerdy and had a tough time with the ladies. Anyways, the guy starts talking on and on about his favorite sci-fi fantasy books as well as some card game that sounded similar to D&D. There's nothing wrong with those interests, but the girl was clearly not receptive. She was giving him all kinds of physical and verbal cues that she wanted to change the discussion, but this guy would not stop talking. While I was watching, I wanted to help him, tell him to change the subject or something, but I couldn't think of a smooth enough way to help out. Maybe it was because he was nervous. He gets up to go to the bathroom, knocks the table, which causes the girl's hot latte to be spilled all over her front. He apologized profusely, but you could see she had checked out of the date. She left after drying herself. Hope he found a girl that appreciates sci-fi books and Piers Anthony as much as he does. Mom comes in earlier that day, tells me she's helping her son plan his first date. She asked if I could help her out make everything looks really fancy and all that good stuff. I didn't have much to do that day, so I said why not. I got everything ready for them. I held a great table with a great view of the ocean for them, chilled a bottle of apple cider by their table, got a dessert tray ready. It was fancy. Heck, I would have loved to go on that date. I kid you not, little Billy and Susie were staring at their cell phones the entire time. It was a dimly lit place and all you could see was the candlelight and their faces because of their phones. I was ready to high five this kid on the way out, give him a go get her son, but no, I was ashamed. I have a feeling mom set them up and put too much pressure on the son. A mom should not be that involved in a first date. I was working at a cafe for a while. I've seen a few awkward dates happen. One comes to mind in particular. Guy and girl come in and take a seat, order food, etc, etc. The date in general seemed to go generally well until it came to paying for the bill. The girl, all of a sudden, starts kicking up a fuss about the food they'd just eaten. She was pretty loud. My coworker was very apologetic about it all, offered to give them a discount. The girl made a huge deal of getting the entire meal for free, saying she was a law student, blah blah blah. The guy is looking clearly embarrassed and offers to pay for the meal and not to worry about it. The girl snaps at him, tells him not to pay for bad food, bad service, and storms out. Coworker gives the guy a discount and he pays for the lot. Guy tells us that it was a blind date. They'd met on OkCupid. One of those. Not a first date, but very awkward. Guy comes in with an escort and drops a good amount of money on booze at the bar. Then she leaves a few hours later, and he informs us that his wife is on her way to meet him for dinner and tips us an extra $200 to keep our mouths shut, keeping it classy. This is what happens when men try to multitask. They end up $200 down. I brought out the check while the man was in the bathroom and the woman looked at the check and said, "It only came out to this much. I should have gotten more." A generous interpretation is that she underordered because she thought the place looked too pricey and was still hungry. I'm in college and I wait tables at a restaurant on the main street near campus. There hasn't really been one specific date, but students always come in on dates and just sit on their smartphones the entire time that they're at my tables. They'll talk for the first few minutes, but they don't know how to keep a conversation going and they just stare at their phones until I bring them the check. Why did you even leave your dorms if this was all you were going to do? Time to start the Reddit campaign for real dates don't include cell phones. Not a first date, but apparently I ruined some old lady's anniversary because her salad had the dressing on it rather than on the side. She literally said, "You have ruined my anniversary." I wanted to reply, "How sad." Instead I just asked her if I could get her a new salad. I hate those people. I worked in a bar while I was in college and I had a guy come in before his date and told me that whenever he ordered a scotch what he really wanted was Chardonnay. I must have given him an off look because then he got embarrassed and confided in me that he was really in love with the woman meeting him there for the date. He told me how she usually dated guys that were more macho and he didn't want to order wine in front of her, but if he ordered anything else he would make a face because he didn't like the taste. I felt pretty bad for the guy so I agreed. He seemed like a genuinely nice man and I wanted to help him out. Well, the woman this nice man was in love with was a total B. She came in with 2 other women to their date. He mumbled something to me about maybe not being clear, and plastered a smile on his face. The woman was extremely charismatic. She was one of those life of the party women and the guy was very quiet. Anyways, later in the evening he ordered another scotch. He had been doing this all night, only this time when I brought it to the table she insisted she wanted to try it. She said that she had never had scotch before etc etc. It was like watching a train wreck. He tried to stop her saying things like, "Here, let me buy you a glass," etc. Well, she took one sip and knew it was wine. I tried to help him, going over and apologizing, pretending it was my mistake, but she guessed the truth and started teasing him. Her friends joined in laughing as well. I felt awful and I could tell he was really embarrassed, even though he was laughing along etc. After a while he asked for the bill. I brought him the tab with his and the woman's portion and he told me he was paying for everyone. I felt so awful. The woman and her friends had all had so many drinks the tab was over $100, but I brought it and he tipped me 50, making me feel if possible more awful. They were my last table, so I closed out with my manager and went back into the bar to have a drink with another girl that worked there. The group was still there, so I decided to go over and ask to buy him a drink. I just wanted to, I don't know, help him or something. Make him look good and possibly make that woman jealous. Well, I went over there and asked if I could buy him a drink. He smiled at me, got up from his chair, and took me aside. He told me I was very beautiful, but I was too young to be hitting on men old enough to be my father. I almost explained to him that I was just trying to help him, but decided not to. I figured that he could use the ego boost after that date. Thank you to whoever gave me the gold. I've never been gilded before, haha. AWW kinda cute. Classy older guy doesn't play games with jailbait. I work in a comedy club. First date in the front row. Comedian does a whole long bit about sex. Asks the girl on the date what her favorite thing about sex is. She giggles. Comedian asks, "Is it anal?" The girl shakes her head yes. Everyone laughs. The guy tells the comic it's their first date. Everyone loses their mind. Dear diary, jackpot. I'm a waitress at a bar, and a young couple came in. Automatically add them. They ask what the specials are as they glance around. We get a short conversation going. Eventually we figure out what they want. The guy orders a beer, the girl orders a mixed drink, and they order a couple of shots. He has a tequila and she orders a BJ. As he hands her the shot he says, "This better be a hint and warm up to the real treat you can have later." She graciously took the shot before walking out the door without so much as a bye. See, while this may be a douchy thing to say, I would have guessed that anyone ordering a BJ on a first date is trying to suggest more than a beverage preference. I mean, inappropriate way to react, but depending on the direction that the date was going, not sure why this couldn't have just been a light-hearted joke. Not a first date, at least I don't remember the guy being Ted Mosby, but I once saw marriage proposal get turned down. The poor dude had it set up all nicely and everything. Years ago I was waiting tables and I also happened to be training someone new. We got seated and this guy tells us that he has a blind date that night and he showed up a little early to slam some beers to calm his nerves. Well, obviously the guy ends up crap-faced. You can tell the girl wasn't really feeling it, but made that clear when we came back after delivering the food. She just starts yelling at him, "Tell them the joke. See if they think that's funny." And then dude proceeds to tell a rape joke. The girl thought it was disgusting and left without even finishing dinner. Even more awkward though was that the trainee turned to me as we were walking away and says, "Yeah, I'm a rape victim, yikes. TL. DR. Don't tell rape jokes on your first date. Or don't tell rape jokes." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.